who doesn't know me, I'm C.J. Ogilvy. Ralph Burke was my grandfather. We're here today to remember him and to celebrate his life. In the spirit of that, the bar will be open throughout the service, so feel free at any time to go up and grab yourself a drink. But first off, we're going to start off with Dennis and Margaret Burke to talk a little bit about Ralph. And I will say to anyone speaking up here, hold the mic close. It needs to be right up there.
Hi everybody. So sometimes things happen for a reason.
Closer to your mouth, please.
Shirley, Ralph, and Dennis were spaced out by 7 years, and even though there was a gap, and when they got older, Shirley landed in the Northwest Territories, Ralph for a time went to the Northwest Territories, and later back at the farm, and Dennis in Ontario, the three of them shared a bond. No matter where they lived, they always thought of one another and pulled together. When Ralph was ill and had bypass surgery, Shirley came down from the Northwest Territories and stayed with him for 2 weeks. She said Ralph doesn't have very good housekeeping skills, but I can put up with it for a couple of weeks. When Shirley was recovering in the Northwest Territories from one of her hip surgeries, Ralph drove to the Northwest Territories to spend a week with her over the Christmas holidays. That's just around the corner. When Shirley was, when Mary had passed, everyone was together. It was always interesting when they were. There was always a healthy conversation as to the history of things, how to spell Burke. One could say it was an argument or just a healthy conversation. The first Christmas after Mary died, Ralph came out to Ontario for a month and spent Christmas with us. He saw a lot of Toronto, Niagara Falls, and Ottawa. He loved history. He went to Ottawa museums, and we took him to some in Oshawa, one of which was where they had military missiles, artifacts, lots of history from Ajax, where they were built, and their Aunt Vicky had worked there during the war. The last night before Ralph was to fly out, Ralph got a hotel across from the airport because he had a 6 a.m. flight. So Dennis and Ralph spent the day in Toronto, and then they went to a Leaf game, after which they crashed at the hotel across from the airport. In the morning, they were going to go for an early breakfast, and then Dennis was going to drop Ralph off at the terminal to catch his flight. At 3 a.m., I heard a noise, and of course it was Dennis. And I said, "Why are you home?" He said, "I can't sleep with him. He snores so loud, I can't take it." He had a few choice words, and I said, "Okay, well, did you say goodbye?" He says, "No, he'll figure it out."
It was brutal, I tell you. I didn't sleep all night.
Dennis spent a lot of time at the farm growing up. He bought the 56 Ford and he tore it apart and rebuilt it, and some things don't change. He's still tearing it apart and rebuilding it 40 years later, but it's in Ontario, not in Outlook. But Ralph, Shirley, and Mary never understood why he liked that old junk so much, and they always had a laugh about that. In August of 24, Dennis, Josh, and I came to visit Shirley, Kenny, and Yoli for 1 week, and Ralph for the second. It was fantastic. Everyone was good. Clay and Jamie had everyone up to the cottage. The weather was perfect, and there was lots of nice memories that were had. Later that year, Shirley, Ralph's sister and Dennis's sister, took ill, and in the new year of 2025, it was determined that she had had cancer, and sadly she passed. Kenny and Yoli's family, along with Ralph, Dennis, and Dustin, spent a lot of time together, visiting Shirley and reminiscing.
You all right?
Yes, I'm good. Everyone was to get together in August for Shirley's celebration of life here in Outlook, which did take place and was so well thought out and heartfelt.
We're almost done.
Yeah, but you can tell I'm older. It's not the cell phone, right? But anyway, no comment, right? Around the second week of August, Ralph and Dennis were talking, and Dennis offered to come out and help Ralph with the harvest since we were coming out later in the month for Shirley's celebration of life. This was when we found out that Ralph was ill, although he wouldn't admit the seriousness of his illness. Because Dennis was retired, he came out within the week. Kenny picked Dennis up at the airport, and they went to Ralph's and spent some time with him. Talks in the shop, they took Ralph for some treatments. And the one time when Dennis and Kenny were in the waiting room, they heard Ralph tell the nurse I had to tell the boys that there was a free coffee and cookies so they could take me to my treatment. Kenny lives in Regina, so he'd come home and go back on weekends to see Ralph. And Dennis stayed well into September at the farm, and he helped John take the crop off. Dennis did come home for about 10 days when Ralph's health declined, so he flew back and stayed at the farm. Visited Ralph every day, and when he was hospitalized and had taken so ill, Kenny came out most weekends, and on Thanksgiving weekend, the two of them went to the hospital after Thanksgiving dinner at Clay and Jamie's, which was the night of Ralph's passing. Sometimes things happen for a reason. Dennis was able to spend quality time with both Ralph and Shirley because he had made the decision to retire, and he was able to spend quality time with Ralph before he had to go in the hospital. It's there for him. So
My son is going to use a toast.
Nobody had any drinks.
You're going to get one now.
If you'd like to join us for a toast to Ralph, we will miss your baritone voice and laughter, your sense of humor, resilience to all of life's challenges that were thrown your way, and your zest for life. We will miss you. Rest in peace, and thank you.
Thank you, that was fantastic. So, kind of along those lines, we're just going to have a few different people come up who've prepared things ahead of time to share some memories about Ralph. And then after that, we're actually going to leave the microphone open while we have food and drinks and socialize, so that if anyone has a memory of Ralph they want to share, they're welcome to come up and do so at the time. But first up, we have Clay and Jamie Ogilvie. So Clay is Ralph's son-in-law.
Ralph was a very big part of my life since I was 15 years old. He was a big guy with a big personality. He always saw the humor in things. He had sayings he used continuously, and he told any story he thought was amusing repetitively over and over and over again. We were always pretty close. We spent a few years golfing a couple times a week. Once he bought a motorcycle, we did many day trips most years. The last few years of Jody's life, Ralph really stepped up. They sat down and hashed out their past differences, and I give Ralph full credit for that. During those last few years, Ralph was a big help whenever I asked. He spent a lot of time with Jody in those years. It was very good for them both, and myself, and classic Ralph, he always saw the humor in everything. One day, he came to spend some time with Jody, and when I had appointments in Saskatoon, while he was with her, she accidentally fell forward out of her power chair, and as she did, her shirt caught the controls, and she basically ran over herself. Ralph, meanwhile, was laying back in a power recliner, and it was super slow to go back to the sitting position. So it took at least 2 minutes before Ralph could help Jody. When I got home, he could not stop laughing about how dumb the whole situation was, and if anybody had been watching, how much they would have laughed. Jody running over herself in the power chair, and Ralph taking it a good 2 minutes for the chair to unrecline so he could help. It was one of those times that could have been very sad, very awful. But because of Ralph's sense of humor, and he couldn't stop laughing about it, Jody also saw the humor and it felt better and found the situation pretty awesome, actually. Ralph came out and helped a few harvests, and helping Ralph run equipment was an absolute adventure. He 100% refused to ever use auto steer. He was convinced that he could drive better, so he ended up cutting an awful lot of circles in square fields. But he was in his glory. He loved running big equipment and being a help, and he truly just wanted to be a part of it all. I will always miss the 2 to 3 times a week phone calls. He was always interested in what we were doing, where we were going, what we were up to, or the kids. Once again, he just wanted to be involved. After Jody passed, Ralph and I spent even more time together, and especially on the phone. It was an extremely difficult time for us both, and I will always appreciate him and his sense of humor and his genuine concern. When I started to date Jamie, one of the first people I took her to meet was Ralph. She was very concerned that it was going to be awkward. And I said, no, you just trust me, wait till you meet Ralph, you'll understand. We went to a shop, and Ralph was classic Ralph. Super excited, a million questions, tons of laughs. When we finally left, we literally got a half a mile away, and he called me. I said, okay, Ralph, you're on the speakerphone. He says, okay, just want to know I'm super happy for you. You're still young, you looked after Jody very well for a very long time, and I'm happy you're dating. Jamie's an absolute peach, and I'm very glad you're having sex with her. That's fantastic, man. I just can't believe it. And I said, Ralph, you're on speakerphone. He says, yeah, okay, well, I just wanted you to know everything's cool. I'm very happy for you, and it's awesome that you're having sex with her. Jamie's a real peach. Yeah. And then he phoned about 3 more times that day to say the same things. Ralph became very close with Jamie as well. If he couldn't get a hold of me on the phone, he immediately would call Jamie, and then he would just simply talk to her for an hour. His support and acceptance meant a lot, and we appreciated that immensely. When Ralph got sick, and I was taken to Saskatoon Cancer Clinic almost daily for a while, we had a lot of very good talks. He didn't want to talk about the end, just not the way it was, but eventually he did when he was ready. At first he said he didn't want anything, just cremate me and put me in a hole. But after much discussion, he decided that he did maybe want people to get together. Have a few drinks, have a few laughs, absolutely nothing religious, just drinks and laughs. And he insisted that everyone say nice things about him. No shit talk about me just because I'm gone. And then the Ralph big laugh, which of course he then repeated 7 more times. I have so many memories and stories that make me laugh. It was hard to pick just a couple. So one of the very first ones, when I was about 15, Ralph came to the farm to pick me up to go to a movie in Saskatoon with Jody and Dustin. Hot day in June, they pull up. I get in the back seat with Jody. Ralph immediately turns and hands back a beer and says, it's a hot day. Man needs a cold beer on a hot day. We take off for the city. We get to about Swanson. There's a guy changing a flat on the side of the road. Ralph hammers on the brakes, cuts a U-turn. I said, oh, okay, we're pulling over to give him a hand, changing his tire. Ralph replies, shit, no, we're giving him a beer. I said, well, it is a hot day. Ralph roars and laughs and says, yeah, man needs a cold beer on a hot day. Dustin and Jody are embarrassed, but I couldn't stop laughing. We continue on, get to Saskatoon, right downtown. 2nd Avenue, Ralph accidentally turns into the city bus area where all the only buses are allowed. We get boxed in. The bus driver's waving her hands at him. Ralph rolls down the window, sticks his head out and says, yeah, I know, I messed up. Just pull over a bit and let me by. Rolls the window up and says, oh, for Christ's sakes, what the hell's wrong with this bitch? Just move. Dustin says, oh, Jesus, how embarrassing. Perhaps we should have taken a different route. Ralph responds, well, that's a suggestion you could have made 2 minutes ago. Then laughs and says, perhaps we should have taken a different route. And the big Ralph laugh, which then he repeated another 10 or 15 times that day. Jody and I laughed until we cried because it was hilarious. A couple of years ago, Ralph called when Jamie and I were driving. He says, oh man, you would not believe what happened to me. The Dairy Queen in Outlook opened, and everyone is going there because it has a drive-thru. So I also had to go. You know, big city convenience in a small town. So I went and got food and an extra large strawberry milkshake for lunch. By late afternoon, I felt awful. So I thought, you know, that milkshake was tasty. I think it would hit the spot to go have another one. So went back to town, drive-through of course, because you know, big city convenience in a small town. Got another extra large strawberry milkshake, went home, ate that, fell asleep on the couch, Woke up a couple hours later and thought I was going to die. I felt so bad. I couldn't even get off the couch without pooping my pants. It was awful. So I slept on the couch because I literally couldn't get up the stairs. Woke up in the morning, felt slightly better, so by noon I thought, I bet an extra large strawberry milkshake will settle my stomach. So off to town I go, drive-through obviously, big city convenience in a small town, you know. Ate that, shortly after was stuck on the toilet for 2 hours. Then I remembered I'm lactose intolerant. Ralph's great big laugh, and he says, I almost did myself in with milkshakes. Laughed, told the story 3 more times, and then repeated the punchline 10 more times. And that was Ralph all the time. Before I finish up, I guess I'd just like to also, I want to thank Dennis for coming when he did and staying as long as he did. That took an awful lot off of mine and Jamie's plate, and Ralph absolutely loved having you there. That was fantastic. He really needed that. Also Bunk, David, Chico, Dennis, Dale, the list goes on, and I'm sure I'm missing people, and I apologize for that. You guys all spent a lot of time with him in the hospital, and that was huge. And you guys are all very good friends to him, and that meant a lot to Ralph. It was very important to him. But anyway, Ralph is Ralph. And I think anybody that knows Ralph knows what that means. Family gatherings are not quite the same anymore. And the weekly phone calls, the humor, his big laugh are all great memories, and we definitely miss him.
All right, thank you. So next up is the grandkids. Bailey will be talking to you as well. Bailey Kozar, sorry.
Thanks, CJ. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today to celebrate the life of the enormous personality that was Ralph. My name is Bailey Kozar, and I'm one of Ralph's grandchildren. I have 2 siblings, Justine and CJ, and if you haven't met any of us before, I would just say that we all inherited some traits from Ralph, for better or for worse, like his enthusiasm, definitely his volume, his inability to listen for longer than 5 seconds in my siblings' cases, and a pretty strong case for ADHD all around the board. When the 3 of us sat down together to talk about what traits define Ralph to us, the key qualities that stood out were certainly his boisterousness and his humor, as I'm sure that most people that knew him would attest to, but also his unwavering enthusiasm for being involved in our lives in any capacity that he possibly could. We wanted, obviously, to take the opportunity today to share some of our favorite Ralph stories with you all, because he just gave us too much good material over the years to keep to ourselves, and we hope that you will come and do the same once we're finished up here. What we remember most about Ralph from when we were kids is just how carefree he was about living his life. I remember sneaking him marshmallows while having a barbecue at his house, because my mom had told us both that he was not allowed to eat them due to his diabetes. And when she caught us and he got in trouble, he just laughed it off and went on with his day. As we grew up, this trait of his continued to show up in our interactions, and when paired with his total lack of attention span, would just drive us wild sometimes. There was one summer in particular where CJ and I were voluntold that we would be spending the better part of a week helping Ralph repaint the outside of his house. And oh my God, to this day, we still talk about that project. He was so excited to have us there helping him paint that he forgot to actually do any painting. Ralph spent 4 days standing at the base of our scaffolding, asking us 1,000 times in a row if we wanted a Dr. Pepper or some Twizzlers, telling us that we were working too hard, insisting we needed a break, offering us more sugary snacks, offering to go for lunch at 10:30 in the morning when we'd started working at 10, and generally just chit-chatting. We were there to get the job done, and we didn't want to be hand-brush painting an old house in 30-plus degree weather in July, so we would tell him to get back on his own side of the house and get frickin' working. So we'd wander off for 15 minutes, then he'd come right back around the house again, offering us Dr. Pepper and Twizzlers. CJ and I at this point could probably do a side-by-side impersonation of the tangents that he would go on without even practicing with each other. To a couple of teenagers that figured they had better things to do with their summertime, it was like the most infuriating experience you could have ever imagined. But looking back now, it's a funny memory for all of us and a testament to just how much he enjoyed having us out there to help and wanted us to have a great time too. We have endless examples of Ralph being just over the top enthusiastic about being involved in all of our lives. When CJ was in high school, Ralph was supposed to pick CJ up from badminton practice, but somehow pick CJ up turned into show up partway through practice, head onto the court in your work boots, take a racket away from another player, take said player's position on the court, and get practicing. CJ says to this day, he was pretty good out there. He very, very generously hosted both CJ's and my high school grad parties at his shop, which was not a small favor. We had like DJs, food, drinks, people everywhere, for sure, a couple hundred students milling around. And he was hands down the most enthusiastic chaperone in attendance and the last person to shut the party down both times, not surprisingly at all. He had hunted down an old tricycle when Justine's son Paxton was born, and as soon as he felt that Paxton was old enough to learn to ride, he put an enormous amount of time and energy into fixing it up and painting it to look like new. He was absolutely giddy with excitement when Justine sent him videos of Paxton and Barrett both riding around on it. Sometimes, Ralph would get a little bit ahead of himself with being involved in our lives, like the time that he walked straight into my house in Saskatoon, dressed in full motorcycle gear without any warning whatsoever. My husband Riley and I were in the middle of barbecuing supper, and Riley had just noticed a motorcycle creeping by our yard suspiciously slowly when suddenly my front door flew open. I looked over and there's just a gigantic hulking man in my entryway with the full gear on, helmet, goggles, everything. So I obviously thought I was being robbed. I was about to head for the putter that I keep in my bedroom closet when he pulled off his helmet and I realized that it was not a Hell's Angel bruiser, it was just my grandpa. He'd been telling us for months that he wanted to come and check out the new house, and I, thinking that he might do something like this, had been telling him for months to just give me a call or a text and we would happily have him over for supper and a couple of beers, but just let me know when he wanted to come by. He did not do that. He also refused to eat any of the freshly ready food that we offered him, but gladly had a couple of Bud Lights with us, shared some old stories about his days working in the Northwest Territories, and then disappeared as quickly as he'd shown up. His stubborn nature is something that infuriated us all at one point or another, but something that also made him so inherently Ralph. If you knew Ralph, you can imagine the butting of heads that would commonly take place between him and Justine, who had taken up a career in nursing and had pretty reasonable opinions on proper insulin use over the years. Justine, unfortunately for her, only had a university degree and common sense on her side of the argument, which was never any match for Ralph's own system of managing his diabetes, which typically involved drinking a full jug of orange juice, eating a king-size O. Henry, and then taking however much insulin he deemed appropriate to balance it out. As much as he and Justine would argue over what the best health practice was, he would always make sure that they left on good terms. And Justine remembers one particular instance where he actually called her after she'd already left for the day, just to make sure that they were all good with each other, because he couldn't stand the thought of her being mad at him. As much as his softer side always wanted to make sure that we were all on good terms at the end of the day, even more than that, he loved to give us grief and try to push our buttons. The very last time that I saw him in Outlook Hospital, Riley and I had stopped on our way out of Saskatoon to pick him up some crocheted slippers similar to what his mom used to make, since he'd been asking for a pair to keep his feet warm. He was insistent that they come with pom-poms, but the pair that I found didn't have any, so I picked up a bag of 100 pom-poms at the local craft store that had an enormous variety of sizes and colors. I thought he might like to choose some out for me to glue onto the slippers. He spied the gigantic bag filled with a lifetime supply of pom-poms and proceeded to spend the next hour goading me about how I couldn't possibly have bought enough. There weren't enough colors, there weren't enough sizes, the fabric glue would never hold, you name it. At one point he said to me, and I quote, "Your grandpa's laying in the hospital dying of cancer and you cheaped out on the pom-poms?" Knowing that this was the fastest path to just pissing me off. We definitely had a similar sense of humor and got along best when we were trying to rile one another up over something trivial. Ralph welcomed Braden, Riley, and Kaya into our family with zero hesitation, and he treated them the exact same way that he treated Justine, CJ, and myself. He would often tell Kaya that he couldn't wait to see her as a mom, or he would sit down with Riley and Braden, crack a beer, and just talk sports for hours on end. All of us are obviously going to miss Ralph's enthusiastic, larger-than-life personality, but we're also going to miss the way that he genuinely cared for every single one of us and made it well known to all of us as often as he could. We'll miss the regular phone calls to check in and let us know that he was getting intel on all of us from Dad regularly too. We'll miss him bursting into rooms unannounced and then leaving faster than he arrived. We'll miss his loud, genuine laugh and his total lack of volume control. I will not miss him intentionally feeding my dog human food when he knew I was looking just to get a rise out of me. But pretty much everything else about life with Ralph was an enormous amount of fun and a reminder that life just is not that serious. Again, I want to thank everybody here for taking the time out of their gorgeous Saturday to come and celebrate a truly one-of-a-kind guy. I've taken up enough of your time sharing Ralph's stories, and I'll pass the mic back along, but any member of the Ogilvy family in this room has probably dozens more stories that we're always eager to reminisce on with an audience. So with that, I'd like to give a nice big toast and a final farewell to a guy who can be pretty much summed up in just one word. Beauty!
Awesome, thank you, Bailey. Okay, so next up, we've got a little video that'll play, slideshow of photos of Ralph. All right, so that's sort of the end of the planned portion, but we're now going to have an open mic. So we would encourage everyone to, keep having some drinks, keep having some food, socialize, and if anyone has a memory of Ralph that they feel comfortable sharing, we would really encourage you to come up and do so. And if the urge strikes you to eventually Irish exit, it's probably what Ralph would have done, so we understand. All right, thanks everyone.